Welcome back. The next topic here is a demo for IGMP version 3, but there is a little bit of difference if you're coming from the two demos that we did for IGMP version 2. We did one for iOS routers and one for Junos routers to streamline things a little bit, and because a lot of the detail has been disseminated on those two lectures and those two demos, we are actually doing a combined demo for iOS and Junos routers. So having said that, let's dive right into the topology and see what we have in store here. So this is the relevant part of the topology, as always, as has been for IGMP version 2 and version 3 as well, or for version 1 and version 2 as well. But this time there is a significant change. This time we actually have both iOS and Junos working in combination with each other. So the iOS router here is the R5. So that's the iOS router. And R6 happens to be a Junos router. So they are going to work with each other. IGMP version 3, version 2, they're all standards based. So they should have no problem working with each other, and that's what we are trying to ascertain here. We are initially going to start out with version 2 on both of these, and then we will be moving to version 3. The receivers, they still remain iOS, and they've already joined certain groups, so let's go ahead and see what those groups are. So diving right into our into the verification here. So rec 100 and rec 200. So on rec 100, let's look at the sub interface and what groups have been joined here. So it's the same exact thing as we left from the last demo, which is highly recommended you actually at least go watch one version of that demo, either the Junos version or the iOS version, but otherwise you may find yourself a little bit lost here. On rec 200, the same thing, 239.1.1.200 and 239.1.1.1. So the one thing to notice here is there is one group that is shared by both of them. So if I look here, then the 239.1.1 group is actually shared by both of the routers. And then they have their own specific groups, which 200 happens to be the group on rec 200. And then rec 100 would have the same group as .100. So that's the only difference. Now they have already been set up for IGMP version 2. We have essentially carried the information for R5 and R6, the configuration, forward to this lecture. So let's go ahead and see on R5 and R6 what we have going here. So I have some debugs running here. I'm going to quickly turn those off. And now let's look at the do show IP IGMP groups. So as you can see, we have 239.200, the last reporter is rec 200. We have 239.100, the last reporter is rec 100. And then 239.1.1.1 is a shared group, so the last reporter could be, it would depend on every query interval. It could be the same, it could be one or the other. It doesn't really matter. Now the same thing, 224.0.1.40, still not covering that yet. It's an auto RP group, which we will be covering in a later nugget. Now on R6, let's do a quick show protocol. So IGMP is on. It's the default version, which should be version 2. So if I say run show IGMP groups, I can see similar groups here. So 239.1.1.1, 239.1.1.100, 239.1.1.200. So even though there is one designated querier, because the reports are going to come to both of the routers, they update their IGMP states just based on one set of queries going out essentially. And who is that querier right now? So let's look on the Junos router, and we can say show or run show IGMP interfaces. And what we want to see is what is the querier for G0056 interface, and that actually happens to be R5, 172.26.56.5. So the querying is working, they're listening to each other, they are processing messages from each other. And on here, if I say do show IP IGMP interface, I can see the same thing. They should agree on the, well, it's called the querying router, which is 172.26.56.6. So both of them are working equally right now. Let's look at the steady state on the packet catcher real quick here. And you can see the same thing. There are queries that should be going out. So there you go. There's a general query that is going out. There are queries. There are membership reports that are coming back in. So 239.111.111.111.100, 224.0.0.22, which the Junos router joins explicitly. The iOS doesn't really care about it. 239.111.100, 224.0.0.2, which is the all routers multicast group, that is again joined by the Junos router. And the iOS really doesn't care about it. iOS actually considers it an illegal membership report. So if I was to just turn on debugs here, so if I say debug IP IGMP, I should see that as these reports come in for 22 and 2, they should be deemed illegal by iOS. So if you'd see here, iOS reports those as illegal group joins. So those are just for routers, and iOS and Junos just don't agree on how to implement that part of the RFC. But in any case, turning the debugs off again. Okay, so the next thing here, everything so far is working just on IGMP version 2. Now it's time to move both of these routers to IGMP version 3. So we'll go to the interface on the iOS router and we'll say IP IGMP version 3. It's as simple as that. On R6, it's going to be inside the protocol. So we'll say set protocol IGMP, and inside the protocol, inside the interface. And now I have to actually go into the interface inside that protocol, and I'll say version 3. And then I'll have to commit this as well. Once I do commit this, you'll actually start seeing some IGMP version 3 messages here now. So here's a membership report that's gone up for 224.0.0.22, and this one is from 56.5. So this is from iOS, and it is now also joining the 224.0.0.22 group. So for IGMPv3, it looks like it is also joining that particular group. But once we reach the steady state, you should actually see that everything sort of turns from the querying side to IGMP version 3. However, the membership reports are still IGMP version 2. So these receivers down here are still running IGMP version 2 so far, and that's why they are still sending IGMP version 2 reports. Now that's sort of a backwards compatibility thing on how much of it is going to be implemented. So what I am noticing in this particular case is, even though the query that goes out is version 3, the iOS devices seem to be able to process that query and then send V2 membership reports back. So they are able to do that, but the membership reports are still going out as V2. So all I've seen in the RFC is the RFC says if you receive a V2 report on a V3 router, then you should just process it. So that part of it is happening. It doesn't say anything about the queries. So the queries that are going out are still version 3. And let's quickly make sure that that is the case. Let's look at the queries here. There we go. There's a general query that goes out, and that's a version 3 query if you look at it. There should be another one up here somewhere. There's another query. It is also version 3. So version 3 queries going out, but somehow the iOS routers are at least responding. Now this is not something I would expect on legacy IGMP version 2 devices, so you may actually break the network if you move to version 3. But we'll be going into pure version 3 here in about a moment. But let's look at the membership query itself. So there's a little bit of difference. Still is a query, still there is a max response time here. and there is a checksum. But now, after the multicast address, there are those special fields. So there is the the router side processing field. There is the QRV. There is the QQIC. So to get more details about these fields, I encourage you to look at the IGMP version 3 lecture. But those fields are the extra fields that are now in the IGMP version 3 reports. The QQIC, the querier querying interval count, that's the more interesting field. That should allow the two IGMP routers on the segment to actually tune each other's timers. So what should really happen if that thing is implemented correctly is, as the query goes out from R5 to R6, R6 should be able to look at its querying interval and look at the QQIC that is contained in this query and actually tune that to match that of the designated querier. So let's take a quick look at that, and if we can ascertain if that is happening or not. So on R6, I'll say run show IGMP interface. And I do see that there is a querier. I do see that it has a version of 3. There are 4 groups. IGMP querying interval is 125. That is the default on Junos. Last member query interval is 1. I see the query response. I don't really see anything in here that would tell me that the querying interval has actually been adjusted on R6. So unfortunately, I'm not able to see that. What if I look at the details here? Yeah, I don't actually see that happening in here. So yeah, the RFC says that should happen, but I really have not seen that happen on here. So the querying timers, I'm not sure if they're actually being adjusted. I'm also running some trace options on here. So let's take a look at that, if they show us anything. So do show log, and I believe TO IGMP version 3 is my file. We'll go to the very end of it. I see the query come in here. It's coming from 56.5. There is a max response time, there is a QRV, there's a QQIC, and then nothing really happened processing wise. So I'm not sure if that part of the RFC is actually implemented that well or not. But again, you can see that the IGMP version 3 reports are going out, and they actually look a little, the membership queries are going out, the general queries, and they do have these additional fields. So now it's time to actually change, and just to make sure that we are not missing anything, if you look at the version 2 reports, here is a report for 239.11.200, and you'll be hard pressed to find any difference because there isn't any. It's a plain Jane version 2 report that you would send in a IGMP version 2 only network. So there is really no change here. So now let's go ahead. What we will do is we'll leave the groups intact because we want to see how the reporting actually changes. So we do want to see that. And we want to see that for IGMP version 3. So what I'll simply do is I'll put IP IGMP version 3 under these interfaces here, and also in Rec 200 INTG00.56 IP IGMP version 3. So there's version 3 now, and already you can see that they are sending these unsolicited reports. These are not solicited reports. These should be unsolicited reports that are going out right at the very start. So we'll have to take a closer look at those. But you can actually see that now the reporting actually has turned into IGMP version 3. Now for IGMP version 3, the very first thing to see here is these are ASM reports. So if you look at these 239.111, all of those are any source multicast, ASM. So for ASM, a couple of things that you have to remember. The very first thing for an unsolicited report, you actually change to exclude mode. So that was the very first thing that that report is going to signify. Why? because the default mode was considered to be include for all of the groups that a member actually has. So all of those groups are going to pretend as if the initial mode was include mode. So what you're doing is you're changing to exclude mode, and you are changing to exclude mode with a number of sources here of 0. So the number of sources is 0 on this exclude mode. So change to exclude mode. So change from include to exclude mode for this group. Keep the number of sources to 0. So think about this. If you are excluding 0 sources, so doesn't that mean that you're actually including all sources? And that leads to the property of any source multicast. So that's essentially what the report has changed into. The very first unsolicited report, and again, this is covered in depth in the IGMPv3 lecture, but the very first report is going to change that group's mode to exclude mode, but with a number of sources of 0. So that means it's ASM. You're including all sources by excluding no sources. If I go further down and I look for the next group, I'll see the same thing. For the first few of these unsolicited reports, you won't see any difference. They're all changed to exclude mode. So I'm actually going through here and it doesn't seem to be changing. And after that, you'll actually start responding to the queries. So once you've changed to exclude mode, and now the next query comes in, the next report that goes out, it's simply going to have a mode of exclude, because you've already up here in these reports, you've already asked the router to change the mode of that group to exclude mode. So now all you need to do is you need to just signify that the mode still remains exclude. You still want to exclude 0 sources. But the funny thing here is if I keep on looking, these are 2 separate records. So there is record 1 here, and there is a second record here. So now you can see how IGMP version 3 actually streamlines everything by making a few changes to the reporting structure. The very first change here is the multicast group. So the multicast group where I am, the multicast group where the membership report is going is this well-known group now, 224.0022. And because it is not tied to the destination address of a group like it was in IGMP version 1 and version 2. So if it was version 1, then there would be 2 separate reports. One of those reports would be going out on that address. The other report would be going out on that address. Since we have changed that now, so since we are using a combined address, we can combine all the reports. So I'm not sure what's the upper limit here, but you can actually already see that instead of 2 reports going out, 2 separate reports, there's only a single report going out that has information for 2 ASM groups. The second group here is also an ASM group because the mode is exclude and you want to exclude 0 sources. So it's actually just a plain Jane ASM group. You also see that there is no report cancellation. So earlier, when there was a membership query, everybody set off a random time. And if you heard another member or another receiver report for that group, then you cancel your own timer. That doesn't happen anymore. Because remember, now the receivers don't really listen to each other's reports. The receivers are not listening to this address. They are not listening to the 224.002 address. So that's why they don't really hear each other anymore. So every receiver is now going to send a report for every group that they have. So a report that contains all of the groups that they have, they will now be sending it out. And where this actually helps is in the process of IGMP snooping, which we will cover in a different lecture, but it allows the smart switch sitting in the middle, which in my case, there is no switch here. This is just a virtual switch. This is not an IGMP snooping aware switch. So this is just a V switch. So, but if it was IGMP snooping aware, then combining those reports and everybody sending a report actually helps out. But in my case, that's just simply not the case. We'll be demonstrating that in a completely separate lecture. So now you can actually see the query goes out and then every host actually responds with a report. So 200 responds with a report, 100 responds with a report. It looks like 6 is still stuck in v2. So let me go ahead and make sure I've committed this config. Run show interface, or so show IGMP interface. I have version 3 here, but I think that may have to do with this interface. Let me actually take that interface out. So I'll say delete protocols IGMP interface all, show protocol IGMP. So I had interface all on here. And yeah, so I have GE000 separately, so I'll just commit this config and hopefully this v2 membership goes out. I'm not really sure why it's reporting on v2. Just, yeah, not sure about that. Anyway, but you can see general queries going out, ASM reports coming back in, and every group is reporting. So if I look at 100 and 200, they are always reporting both of their groups. So 100 and 200, they're reporting both of their groups every single time. And that's the streamline effect and also the effect on IGMP snooping from the point of view of IGMPv3. Now let's look on R5 if anything has changed. So we'll say do show IP IGMP groups. So nothing looks changed here, but what if I do group detail? Now you can actually see we do have the group mode here. So for example, this is 239.111. There is a group of exclude and the source list is empty. So exclude no sources, that means it's an ASM group. Same thing for 239.1.1.100. It's an exclude mode and then the source list is empty. So you can actually see now that there is this next level of information available on the iOS router. What about the Junos router? So I'll say run show IGMP group. And that doesn't show it, but what if I do group extensive? Or can I do group extensive? What about group detail? Yep, so in group detail, I can actually see that now I have, so for example, let's pick 239.111. The group mode is exclude, and the sources to exclude are 0000, so you don't exclude any sources. That's essentially Junos' way of telling you that the sources list is empty. And that's what's going on. So these are now ASM joins. The next thing to see here would be to actually look at an SSM join. So what I will do on rec 100 is I'll change this 239.111 and we'll make it source specific multicast. So first of all, I'll say IP IGMP join group. We'll put the same group number in, but this time I'm actually going to include this source. So I'll actually say source, and let's pick a random source, 172.26, how about 1.10? That's the source in our network. We are not going to do any of this yet. This is just to generate that IGMP version 3 report. So first of all, I want to see the change on my interface on the local receiver. Do show run int G0056. And that actually now, at least on here, it shows as an ASM group and also as an SSM group. What I believe to be true from the IGMPv3, and again, different receivers do implement it a little bit differently, but from what I understood, this was actually illegal. But that could just be my understanding of it. Let's look at the actual membership reports that are going out. And all we have to do is look at the membership report for 56.100. So for 56.100, I actually see that there is only one report for 239.11100, so the mode is include on that. And there is a source now for that include mode. So the mode is include right here. The group record is 239.111. The mode on it is now include. So from exclude mode, this is include mode. There is a multicast address. There are one sources, and that is the source that you want to receive from. And remember, so what it looks like, even though the command line is taking both the ASM and the SSM, on the actual wire, all I see from 100 is just a single report, and that's for SSM. So this is not an ASM report. This right here happens to be an SSM report. This up here is an ASM report, but this really is an SSM report, and there is no ASM report for that same group because they are not basically allowed to do that at all. So the one thing here that I wanted to show was this 239.11100, and I want to actually see the mode was exclude, and then this was when we changed from exclude to include and allowed new sources. The router is actually just simply skipping a step, so it should say something like change to include mode and then allow new sources, but it's just going to allow new sources. And the new sources that it is looking at are this. So this is the unsolicited report. That's all you need to know about this. This was the unsolicited report when I first joined that group. And that's exactly what is happening here. Now on R5, I want to see once again the group detail. And this time for 239.11100, the group mode is include, and there is a reporter, and here is the group source list. So the group source list now would have all of the different sources that have been requested. So just for fun, let's add another source on here. So how about 1.11? Now this report right here should get updated with two sources. So let's take a look at that. And there we go. Now it has actually two sources. So 239.11100 now has two sources, two separate sources for that particular group. So we have looked at ASM joins, we have looked at SSM joins, we have looked at the queries, and finally it's time to leave a group. So on here, let's leave an ASM group first. So I'm going to leave on Rec 100, I'm going to leave the only ASM group that's left, which is 239.111. This was the shared group. So there we go. What it should do is it should produce a block all sources. So let me see. It is being reported as leave group, but so Wireshark is reading this report as a leave group, but really what is it? It's actually changing from exclude mode to include mode. So you were in exclude mode and you've changed now to include mode, and you want to include 0 sources. So if you're including 0 sources, that means you're excluding all the sources. So this essentially becomes an ASM leave. So to that ASM leave now, we should also have a group specific query. So this is the group specific query that is going out. This query still goes out on the actual group address because you still want all of the members of that group to listen to this. And once Rec 200 listens to this, it will actually send a join. So it'll basically multicast its already joined group. So it's overriding that leave message that came from R200. This is not much different from IGMP version 2 at all. The final thing to do here is to leave an SSM group. So we will leave this one SSM group. So we'll keep the other one intact. We'll leave one of those. And this should result in a block all sources address here. So there is the report for that particular leave. And essentially this is a block all sources message. So what the receiver wants the router to do is to block some of the old sources it was subscribed to. In this case, it's reporting one source, and that one source is here. So if you were sending me multicast from this particular SSM source, do not send those anymore. And that's all it's saying right here. There should be a group specific query now for the multicast SSM group, and it's right here. So this is a query. This is for 239.11100, and it's for SSM because there is a source present here. And that's about it. So that was the SSM leave, and then the group specific query for that leave. Now, finally, there is that robustness variable. So if you look at the membership query, there was this variable right here, which was the QRV, the query robustness variable. I haven't seen a way to change this in iOS, but just for fun, let's move the iOS router out. So I'm actually going to just take it offline by going to that interface and shutting it down. And on R6, I'm going to kickstart things by deleting the protocol IGMP, committing it. So now basically there are no IGMP queriers of any kind on this network. And then I'm going to roll back on R6. So what have we done here? We've basically restarted the IGMP process on R6. And we have taken R5 completely offline. So R5 is now gone. R6 should now become the designated querier here. So let's take a look. R6 is back. It has committed that rollback. So show protocols IGMP. And there you go. Everything is back and intact. Run show IGMP interface. IGMP is not running. I see it here. I did rollback, but I did not commit. So let me just commit really quick here. Should take a couple of seconds. Now that the commit is complete, we'll say run show IGMP interface. And it should now see itself as the querier. And it does. So it sees itself as the querier. The IGMP robustness count, so that is that QRV, and that's now 2. The fun thing is I want to actually see if I increase this variable. So that means right now the network can take up to 2 drop packets. So the higher the robustness counts, that is how many, well, that literally shows how unreliable the network is. So if the robustness count is 2, that means just send 1 packet. If the robustness count goes up to 7, that means the network is unreliable, and there can be up to 7 drop packets before 1 reaches. So essentially send 6 packets to make sure that 1 reaches. So right now when the IGMP robustness count was 2, and it was 2 for iOS as well. iOS just uses the default. So if I look at one of the iOS reports right here, so this was the iOS query, you can see the QRV here was 2. Now that Junos is doing the same thing, the QRV is still 2. So they're both using the same count, iOS just by default. So, and that's why when you get the membership reports back, you just get 1 report back. QRV is 2, just send 1 report and that should be it. What we want to see here is if we increase that count to say 7, does that make the receiver send more reports? So we'll say set protocols IGMP. And there's the robust count. And I'll raise this robust count to 7. Now, raising it to 10 really doesn't make any sense. It's a 3-bit field. So yeah, I'm just going to go with 7 here. So 2 things we want to see after this commit is on the next query, which has gone out right now, the QRV is 7. And we want to see how many reports come back in. So as you can see, even look at the queries right now. There's so many queries going out. So where was that very first query with QRV7? So here's the very first query with QRV7. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 queries, and almost that many reports coming in. So you can actually see now they are a lot more chatty. They are repeating a lot of these messages. There are some algorithms that are working on the back end. But you can see that the network is much more chatty, and the chances of losing a packet here is very, very remote. These are all the same packets sent over and over and over again. That is all really that we have for IGMPv3. If you have any questions, concerns, anything at all, anything you'd like clarified that I probably didn't go over, you felt I skipped, leave us a message in the comments section. I try to get back to as many comments as I can. Apart from that, I hope you've enjoyed this video.